Alright, today let's talk about some Fluffal OTK for Link format. Now, Fluffal OTK is really the only way the deck normally plays, and seeing as how if you're really interested in already playing the deck by this point, you've probably already looked up and built it. This is just a normal not classification, fuck, what would the word be for that? Right, it would be a small little tips and tricks to playing them in Link format, in addition to just basic cards to run if you're getting new to the deck. So, firstly, to start, Fluffal Penguin, it helps you get cards on the field, and seeing as how Fluffal monsters, some of them really like to be on the field to use their effects, it is nice to have a way to add a bit of additional swarming to that without having to just use a normal summon for one monster and one monster only to leave you with an empty field in the case that your opponent does something. So, say you want to special summon your Fluffal dog. Okay, good, you get a search, and that's great. Which means you have another card in hand, and that means you have probably a way to fusion summon if you really need it. If not, you can rank 4. Seeing as how a penguin plus a dog makes, Utopia, you can always just go into Utopia the Lightning if you have literally nothing better you can do with your turn. You can also summon things like Fluffal Bear, which you could also instead have sent to the graveyard from your hand to get a Toy Vendor if the plays you want to make favorite, or you could summon it to get a Poly. In addition to that, if you fuse away your Fluffal Penguin, you get to draw 2 cards. But then you also have to discard 1, so you do go down a bit. It's really only a +1 off of it, but it's still draw power that Fluffals really like to have. So, besides that, you have Fluffal Wings. If it's in your graveyard and you control Toy Vendor, you can banish it and target a Fluffal monster in your graveyard, and then also banish that. Then if you do, draw 1 card. Already, that's okay, seeing as how you probably won't be fusing a lot from the grave, but you really, really want to be careful with that, what you're gonna banish. And then you can send 1 Toy Vendor to the graveyard, and if you do again, draw a card. So, that's already 2 draws, and you get Toy Vendor's search effect, which means you just added 3 cards to your hand, which means you could have drawn Polymerization, you could have drawn any more fusion cards that you could really want, or a way to search them, and you get to add 1 card to your hand that you might desperately need. Besides that, Toy Vendor's effect is basically you get to discard 1 card and draw 1 card, and if it's a Fluffal monster, you get to special summon it. If not, throw it in the grave. You don't get a choice in that matter. You have to throw the card in the grave if it's not a Fluffal monster, which means even if you draw an Edge-Up monster, it still goes to the grave. However, upon being sent to the grave, you still get to search your Edge-Imp Sabers or Fluffal monster, which means you're really going to want those Sabers. So, besides that, Edge-Imp monsters, which really make the deck work, because if you don't have it, you can't really fuse. It doesn't really matter about it, it's declaring an attack, whatever, it doesn't care. If this card is sent from your hand or field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Frightfur card from your deck to your hand, which means you can add your Frightfur fusions, your Frightfur patchworks, if you really need it. Anything really. I'd personally recommend adding the patchwork, as it does enable far, far more fusing. Besides that, you have Sabers, which is you get to place 1 card from your hand on top of your deck, and then you get to special summon this card in defense position, which means for the cost of sending 1 card from your hand to be drawn again next turn, you can have this immediately ready as fusion material. Really good. It can be searched with Toy Vendor again. Frightfur Patchwork, just that you add an Edge-Imp and a Poly to your hand, but you can only activate it once per turn, but that is still just a really good search card if you draw it first turn. Now, frankly, this is where we start getting to tech territory just for main deck. I really run 1 Frightfur Fusion, 1 Factory, and 2 Refusion, because if you have to go first, and for some reason your opponent clears your field, or if you're going second and the OTK doesn't go through, or if they do something to you, and you just can't kill them, you have Refusion as an option, which is You pay 800 and you can select one fusion monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and then equip it to it. Which means you get whatever they destroyed back, and it's still there in the condition it could be that you would want it to be in, unless it is a card that required multiple fusion materials. Like Fluffal Saber Tiger, which really is what keeps Fluffal OTK going. So basically, we'll actually really get to him in a moment. Now, for the most part, Fluffal OTK can be done multiple ways. You can summon Kraken to your extra monster zone, and then you can fuse it away. It doesn't really matter what you fuse it away. If you fuse away this, or a Frightfur Tiger, or maybe even a Wolf, it doesn't really matter what you fuse away, because you're going to be getting it back with Saber Tiger, which will then resurrect it, give it more attack points, and if you use 3 or more materials, namely just use 3 materials, you don't need more. The Saber Tiger is completely immune to destruction. Now, mind you, it's okay. Then again, I do believe, now mind you, this is me being really, really terrible at remembering rulings. I do believe if you originally fusion summoned it and somehow special summoned it back, it's still protected by card effects. Don't quote me on that. If you fucking do, you're probably right. Now, just other first fusion options are Fluffal Tiger, which is Frightfur Tiger. If your opponent has some really scary back row, or they have a card on the field that you really, really don't want to have to worry about, you can just summon Tiger with however many materials you need and just pop a card each. Namely, I use this for back row removal, but you can just destroy other shit. Doesn't really matter. Besides that, if your opponent has an empty field for some reason going second, while you are going second, you can just fuse away as many monsters as you need with this and then just OTK. It doesn't matter. 5 if you for some reason are running Upstart and activate it. 4 just regular, which means you just need Unedge Imp Sabers, which, mind you, isn't the most searchable card, just plain, but it doesn't really matter because Frightfur Wolf with 4 materials and an empty board is just game. Now, normally the safest option if you're not scared of your opponent's cards or back row is just to summon Kraken and then fuse it away for Saber Wolf. Now, after you summon Saber Wolf, you get to revive one Frightfur monster in your graveyard, which means that goes to your main monster zone. Which means you can summon Saber Tiger, revive whatever you used it with, then summon another Saber Tiger. At that point, you're out of Saber Tigers, but you do have just enough attack on board to swing for game on pretty much any field or put some serious hurt in your opponent. Now, besides that, the deck does have a few weaknesses. One, if you do brick, you brick fairly hard. And besides that, if your opponent has any deck that would lock you out of the extra deck, namely Domain Monarchs, that one Jeff Jones deck that is really inconsistent, that likes to just spam link monsters that can now fill up your extra monster zone. But seeing as how that deck does tend to mainly focus on Firewall Dragons, that is probably not going to be much of a problem. So you'll probably be fine, except the Firewall Dragons will be a pain in the ass, since they'll just try to bounce everything you own. And if those decks are really, really meta-relevant, chances are you're not even going to be well off just trying to play Fluffals to begin with, seeing as how you don't really have any protection against a Firewall Dragon bounce to begin with. But, frankly, the deck is still perfectly playable in the way that most people like it. OTK out the ass, and just win. So, I guess next week I'm going to be doing Cosmos.